Hello again, my name is Tuppence. This week I want to make something that is going to be practical, something that I can use on my Christmas dinner table. I don't often set the table, but Christmas is the day that we make a difference and we really do go out and lay it nicely. So I want to use some of this Christmas fabric. It's actually meant to be a table runner. It's got lovely glittery snowflakes on it, but it sheds glitter everywhere. So I've never used this. So I'm going to encase it in some resin, and I'm going to use this to create a tray that I can put my seasoning, my gravy boat, whatever on, and it'll be on my Christmas table. So the first thing I need to do is stabilize my fabric. I want to seal in that glitter, and I want to make sure that it doesn't fray when I cut it or give off too many bubbles when it absorbs the resin. So the first thing I need to do is to make sure that I've got enough. So I'm just going to cut this to size. All right, that's fine. I'm going to use that for something else. So now I've got my piece of fabric, and I don't know if you can see, but this is already covered in bits of glitter. So now that I've got my piece of fabric, I need to make sure that this is sealed. And to do that, I'm going to paint this with either glue or I'm going to actually use watered down varnish, watered down acrylic varnish. So you can use either. So I've got this varnish that is from Creole, and I've just put it in a bottle, and it's 3 parts varnish to 1 part water. So you can see it's a little bit thinner, and that's going to help it to soak into the material a little bit better. So I've just got this onto my silicone mat, and I'm going to use a piece of sponge to add this to the material. I'm going to squirt the varnish on top until most of the area is covered, and then I can use the sponge to fill in any gaps. I'm going to dab the sponge up and down, and it will pick up the varnish, and I can make sure that everything's covered because you can see that it changes colour. That looks like it's all nicely covered now, so I'm just going to lift it up and clean up any of the excess varnish from underneath. And now I need to dry this, and the best way that I've found to do that is to put it on top of a cake grid. This is one that I only use for crafting. And I'm going to use my hairdryer, and I've got this set on a medium heat. So I'll dry this side for a couple of minutes, and then I'll turn it over and do the other side. I'm going to repeat the varnishing and drying process one more time. So this has had 2 coats now, and it is thoroughly dry. And I think you can see it's still flexible, but it's nowhere near as floppy as the original piece. And you can see also that it is very slightly darker in colour, but it would have done that anyway if I had put it in the resin as it was. So now I need to cut this piece, and I'm going to have to make a template in order to do that. So I'm going to bring on my tray, and I've got a piece of card, and I drew around the outside using a pencil. Now that's obviously going to give me a template that is a little bit too big, but when I cut this, I'm just going to trim on the inside of the line, and hopefully I can make it small enough to fit. When I tried it on top of the tray, it didn't fit, so then I had the idea of using an ink pad to mark the edge of the tray, and then I should be able to see that inside line. So I've gone all the way around the edge using a distress ink pad. Then I'm going to lay that sheet of paper back on top and press it down. That's going to transfer the ink, and I can cut inside that ink line, and this should give me a perfect fit for my tray. The ink pad is water-based, so I'm just going to clean that up with a baby wipe. And now I'm just going to cut along the inside of that red line, and this should give me a pretty near perfect fit. So now when I try it, it fits much better. It's still a little bit tight just around this edge, so I am going to trim that if I can get it out. So I'm just going to take a slither off, and then I can try that, and that is perfect. So now that I have my template, I need to transfer that onto my fabric. I'm going to turn it over. I can still see the design through the back, and I'm going to lay it down, and then hopefully this pencil will transfer on. So I'm just going to draw around the template, and I don't think that you can see it, but I can see the pencil line as long as I push hard enough. So again, I'm going to transfer this template by drawing around the outside, but I will cut on the inside of the line to make sure that my fabric piece will fit. And that looks pretty good. I do have a little bit of a gap down here, but I'm not going to worry about that because I'm going to add some mica colour to the edges, so it's not going to be seen from the front. Alright, so now before I put that in, I need to add the colour to the edges. And I'm going to be using the chrome powders from Let's Resin. And I'm specifically going to use the red one. I think that is a really good match for that red glitter of the snowflakes. I'm going to use a soft makeup brush to apply these, and I do want to keep it only to the edge and make sure that they're really rubbed in well. If I have any loose powder, that's going to float onto the middle, and I want to keep that perfectly clear. So I'm going to keep polishing the surface with the colour, making sure that all of that powder is brushed in and there isn't anything loose floating around. As I'm going around, I'm noticing that there are a couple of places where the mica just isn't sticking. It's like a little dot, and this was probably a watermark. So I'm just going to take a little bit of alcohol and a cotton bud. I'll gently clean off that area, and then I can reapply the powder, and it should stick this time. And it's probably because when I cleaned my mould, a small droplet of water dried on there, and the lime scale is preventing any of that powder from sticking. So I'm going to carry on and make sure I go all around the edge, and then I can clean up anything that might go on this middle piece. I got quite a lot of powder on the middle section, so I'm taking a damp baby wipe and I'm running around the edge cleaning it. Then I'm going to take a dry paper towel and I'm going to dab off to make sure that there's no spots of water or liquid before I put the resin in. Okay, I have measured out the 2 parts of my resin, and I have got 70 mils of each to give me a total of 140. I'm using craft resin, and I'm going to use my G3 curing machine to warm this up before I mix the 2 pieces. So I'm just going to put the lid on and plug that in. I like to use this to warm up the individual parts of my resin because it's so cold here in my craft room. I live in a pretty old house anyway. So I'm going to turn this on, and I've got it on the tool mode. I just need to make sure I set the temperature, and I'm going to set it to 110, and then the time I'm going to set that to just 30 minutes, and I won't leave it for that whole 30 minutes, but that's the least that you can put on there. So I'll leave this to warm up, and then I can mix the 2 parts together. Okay, I'm back. That has been on for 15 minutes, and now I'm going to turn that off. And then I can just move this off to the side because it's still plugged in. And here I have my resin. So you can see that they are slightly more fluid, although one is still thicker than the other. So this is part A, that is the thicker, and this is part B. Now it's always better to put your part A into your part B, and I always remember it that part B is below and part A is above. So I think the theory is that the thicker resin will drop down through the thinner resin and makes it easier for you to mix. And certainly if you are using any kind of a mixing machine, they do recommend that that's the way you do it. So I'm going to scrape all of this out of my cup, get these combined, and I'll let my Resiners mixer mix this up. Okay, so that is now finished mixing. I'm going to keep this clear and I'm going to pour this into my mould. And as I'm pouring it, I'm going to heat it up so that this becomes a little bit more fluid and it will flow down into those edges. Hopefully this will give me no bubbles, because I can't really put any kind of a stick or scrape around to make sure that there isn't any bubbles in those right angles. If I did that, I'm going to end up with blank spots in my mica, and that's going to be really visible from the outside. So I'm going to heat this up, and then hopefully that will dislodge any bubbles. And that's it for this layer. I've got this on my G3 curing machine in the flat settings, and I'm going to put the lid on top of this. It's going to cure for 2 hours. So I'm just going to turn the machine on, make sure it says flat, make sure it's on 2 hours, and just check the temperature. It is 140. So I'll be back in 2 hours once this is cured. Okay, so that layer is now all cured and it's just come out of the machine. It's had a cool down. So I've got 40 mils of craft resin mixed up here, and this is going to be my next layer to stick the fabric down. So I'm not going to use all of that. Just grab a spreader, Okay, so I've got a silicone spreader and I'm just going to spread this across the surface, make sure that it reaches all of the edges, and then try and get it to cover everything. I don't want any blank spots in here. And then once I've got this level, I'm going to use my heat gun just to pop any bubbles and make sure that it evens out. I don't want to add too much heat to this because it has only just cured and it's going to carry on curing over the next 24 hours. Alright, this is almost level. Just spread it to the side, that's good. Put that back in the pot. And now I'm just going to give this a very quick blast of heat, pop any bubbles and make sure that it just settles down and evens out. Alright, that's enough. Now I've got my fabric and I want to lay that down. I'm bending it slightly, a bit like a taco. And then I'm going to drop one side down onto the surface of the resin. I'm going to want to make sure that I don't get any bubbles here. Now, the fabric itself has lots of little holes in it, but some of those have probably been blocked up by the varnish that I put on there. As I'm pushing this down with the spreader, the resin may bubble up through some holes that aren't blocked. Otherwise, I'm just going to have to push this underneath that resin and chase out any air. I don't want any bubbles to be under there. So I'm going to bring all that resin up over the top of the surface of this fabric. There you go, you can see that that's all come up to the surface, and now I'm just going to keep brushing this flat so that it sticks down onto the top of that other layer. I don't want any wrinkles to be in this. Now I just need to leave this to cure, and I'm just going to give it a quick blast with the heat gun to pop any bubbles that might have come up through those holes. And I'll be back once this is cured. This is now ready for its final coat. So I've got 80 mils of craft resin already mixed up, and I'm going to add a little bit of this white pigment paste to it. Okay, I have all of that pigment mixed in, so now I'm going to add a little bit of this glittery mica. It's from Meyspring and it's called Dazzling Diamonds. So this should give me a little bit of a shimmer, and it may not be visible from the front of the piece, so you shouldn't see it through that fabric, but I'm going to know it's there on the back, so it's going to look really pretty. That's all mixed in, and I've got just a nice little shimmer to that. Just going to clean off the stick, and now I can pour this into the back, and I'm hoping that I've got enough to cover this. The problem with doing something in layers is that you don't always know whether you've got the right amount for each layer. But in total, I should have roughly around the 260 mark, and this is supposed to take 255. So I should be pretty good. Just scrape out everything that I can. And I think that's going to be okay. I don't need to add anything else. Still got a little bit more I can scrape out of the cup. So I'm going to leave this now, and I'm going to pop this in the G3, but I want to leave it just for a couple of minutes so that it can degas and get rid of any bubbles. And then I'll put this on to cure for 2 hours. That's ready to demold now, and I've got a lovely swirly pattern on the back. So there must have been a little bit of loose powder on the edges. Just going to pull those edges back, and I can see that the colour is beautiful. I really love these chrome powders. Right, I'm going to lay it flat on the table, and then I can pull the mould away. And that has worked really nicely. I've got a nice clean edge. I can't see any bubbles. And that fabric in there is nice and flat. There's no wrinkles. I love the fact that I can use this fabric because it is so pretty, and I just couldn't use it anywhere else. It was just shedding glitter absolutely everywhere. So I'm really happy that this has worked. Now I want to add some vinyl onto this. I'm going to add a saying, and I'm going to use this tray as, it's kind of a jokey thing. I want to put my condiments on here for my Christmas table, things like, you know, cranberry sauce, etc. So I'm going to make a jokey saying to go on here. So I need to measure this to find out how much room I've got, and I'm going to imagine a rectangle. So I can measure across there, and I think I'm going to say about 17.5 centimeters, and I'll make it about 9, I think. So I'm going to say 17.5 by 9, and I'm going to go to the computer. I'm going to go to Cricut Design Space. I'll go to Shapes, and I'm going to select a rectangle. And I'm going to change that to guide. I'll set it to the 17.5 by 9 that I had. Then I can click on text, and I've already got a font that is on my computer selected, so I'm just going to drag that into my rectangle, and then I can start typing what it is that I want. And I'll just duplicate the same text, put it on the next row, and retype what I want. Once I have everything the way that I want, I'm going to select all the text and I will attach those, and then I can delete that guide and cut this out of vinyl. I've already weeded this and applied some transfer tape, and I'm just going to rub on the back of the vinyl, make sure that it's really stuck to that transfer tape, and then I can pull that backing paper off, and hopefully the vinyl will stay on the transfer tape. If I fold that back almost on itself, it works pretty well. This is Oracle 651 that I'm using. Right, now I just need to line this up. Try and bend that paper a little bit so that the middle drops down. There we go. And then I'm just going to gently rub that with my fingers, and I should have a scraper somewhere. It's not really a good idea to be using your nails. So I'm going to scrape that down and make sure that it is really well pressed into the surface. And then I can peel back the transfer tape, and in the same way that I did that backing tape, I'm just going to pull it back almost down on top of itself so that it's almost folded over. And that should leave my vinyl in place. Oracle 651 is a very durable vinyl. It's meant for signs outside, so it's really good. Now I'm going to seal this in. I have got 30 mils of the craft resin. This is a permanent vinyl, so it isn't really necessary to seal it in, but because I'm going to be putting jars on here and they may be sticky, this is going to need to be washed quite a few times, so I think it's just going to be more hygienic if I seal the top. Craft resin is marketed as a food safe resin, but I'm not going to be putting any food in contact with this at all. They will still be in jars. It's not something that I'm willing to take the risk on. So I'm going to scrape out everything that I've got in my cup, and hopefully I've got enough just to put a very thin coat over the surface. Right, I think I have got almost everything that I can out of this cup. I'm going to tilt this and see if I can get that to flow to all of the edges and cover that surface. This is a low viscosity resin, but as you can see it is pretty thick at the moment, and that's because it's very cold here still. And as it gets colder it tends to thicken up the resin. So I think I might need to get my heat gun and heat this up a little bit. I'm going to do this carefully because I don't want to lift that vinyl up. I just want to make this a little bit more runny, and then that should flow around the surface a lot easier. I don't want to add too much resin to this because I do want to still keep it as a tray. I don't want to fill this area up. You can see that is moving a lot better now. So I'm just going to let it flow all around. Make sure everything is covered up. Last little bit. Okay, I'm going to let that level out and lay flat. I'll give it another quick blast with a heat gun to pop any bubbles, and then I'm just going to leave this to cure. So the final thing to do is to go around the back with the deburring tool and remove those sharp edges. I'm not planning on putting any cork on this. It's really pretty, but also it's going to get washed multiple times and I don't want the cork to get wet. So here's the finished product. I really like the look of the Hessian in there, especially with that glitter, and it's a great way of using something which otherwise I would have to throw away. I really hope you've liked this video. If you have, please go ahead and give me a thumbs up, comment, share if you can, and please subscribe if you haven't. You'll be able to help my channel and you can come back and see what I'm going to make next time. Thank you so much for watching. Take care. Bye.